you need to loosen up a little after such a long journey. You must be so tense.
Final Fantasy is one of the biggest franchises in gaming, with each main entry and some spin-offs becoming a brand by themselves, with the franchise expanding into movies, TV shows, concerts, and even other video game franchises that have become their own things. But among these various games, Final Fantasy VII is Square Enix's cash cow, with it being guaranteed money regardless of what the project is, because it's one of the most popular and beloved games of all time that pushed the medium forward back in 1997. But today I'm talking about the most recent iteration, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and specifically the Intermission DLC, that I believe shows how serious the development team is taking this entire project by doing a few things that are going to be expanded upon in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So let's talk about why Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission is really smart. Considering Intermission is just a piece of DLC, you can't expect the entire battle system to change. But there are additions to the combat that are a direct response to the criticisms of the base game, starting with the air combat. Yuffie feels far more capable and fluid in the air than any of the characters from the base game. This can be written off as her being a ninja, so that would make sense within the context of the story. However, when you think about Cloud being superhuman, Tifa's training in martial arts for years, and just how strong these characters are going to be by the end of their journey, it doesn't make sense for them to be so useless in the air. And I don't want our options to be limited to certain characters or just spam magic, which I think is corrected by Yuffie's melee combat. And the second thing I wanted to draw attention to in the combat, her ninjutsu skill. This pushes Yuffie to be my favorite playable character among the 5 available at this point, because it fills a unique role that no other mechanic does by allowing her to do 5 different forms of magical damage without using any MP, which is extremely valuable, just like Tifa's skill that lets you increase the stagger damage multiplier and doesn't just boil down to building ATB or dealing more damage like the other characters. And this makes you think about how you would build your party based on how characters complement each other, which I assume the developers want us to think about in anticipation for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's release. This leads me to the last aspect of gameplay I want to talk about, which is the synergy system, where you can control Yuffie and Sonon to do combo attacks that have special properties, with normal combos building up the stagger meter on pressured enemies, giving you access to special team attacks that do crazy damage or build up the stagger multiplier, at the cost of Sonon's ATB slowing down, which stops you from completely decimating your enemies while using the synergy system. So while I could sit here and rant about how crazy things could get with this system in the future, I think it's obvious that the synergy system is going to be the big new addition in the next game. So from the perspective of someone who wants to develop their own games one day, including these new or improved aspects of the combat system in a DLC instead of a full game is very intelligent. But the gameplay isn't the only thing to praise within episode Intermission, because the story does great things as well. A quick summary of Intermission's story is that Yuffie is sent on a mission by the Wutai government to steal a very powerful materia from the Shinra Corporation, where she has to work with the bigger Avalanche organization and a new character to the Final Fantasy VII universe, Sonon Kusakabe. And during this journey, her desire to defeat Shinra goes from a general dislike to a very personal one. So let me explain some of the great things about this story, starting with the Avalanche main branch getting some shine, and showing the difference between them and our main characters, with how they don't support the bombings at all, emphasizing how people view Barrett and his Splinter Cell as genuine eco-terrorists, and how they want to be seen as a force for good, focusing directly on Shinra without getting other innocent people involved, which is why the story is so great. It shows how well Shinra manages to corrupt and even manipulate the information available to their direct direct enemies, allowing us to look at the characters in the main game with a more critical eye even though we understand the context behind their actions. But Avalanche isn't the only organization that got expanded, with Deep Ground getting some shine as well, managing to throw these concepts in this DLC by repackaging the ideas and frankly staying away from some of the more ridiculous concepts that were introduced in Dirge of Cerberus. But the best part of these DLCs is that they aren't just fan service, they are actually well written and have an impact on the main story. If you look at the main game and then when you look at the DLCs, it is clear that Square Enix did their homework and really put some effort into making sure that these were good stories. But this effort extends itself to the characters themselves, starting with the leading lady Yuffie, who gets a massive character revamp that gives her more reasons to hate Shinra Corporation personally and makes her more than just an annoying kid who joined your group after leaving Midgar. She's now a girl who has been raised by her ninja clan to hate the people who tried to blow up her country, and feels that even innocent citizens are guilty. She doesn't see it as a war between nations, but rather a battle between good and evil. And in her eyes, Shinra is definitely on the wrong side of that war, leading Yuffie to have a very negative view of Midgar upon her entering the city. But by the end of the game, she realizes that Shinra's cruelty extends to the very same people that they're claiming to protect, making Yuffie a far more nuanced and fleshed out character when she reappears in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Then there's the main antagonist of the Intermission DLC, Scarlet, who in the original FF7 and remake is cartoonish levels of evil, using a Shinra soldier as a footrest and dog to fulfill her sadistic pleasures. But within this DLC we get a bit more of her, and it allows us to realize that she loves antagonizing people regardless if it is physical or emotional. She is not just a one-note villain, she's a person that understands her actions and doesn't care if they are right or wrong, and she just wants to cause pain. However, this pain turns into motivation for a brand new Final Fantasy VII character, Sonan Kusakabe, who joins Yuffie and Avalanche so he can get revenge on Scarlet because she designed a weapon that killed his sister. And considering that we only get 4 to 7 hours with this character, he makes a big impact that leads to a great emotional payoff. And considering how this DLC ends, it is pretty obvious that he is going to be a big influence on how Yuffie develops throughout the remake trilogy. So in conclusion, I think that this DLC is a great example of how Final Fantasy VII Remake can tell stories that are just as engaging as the main game. And Yuffie's personal story has a lot to offer as we get to see more of what made her who she is today. Her motivations make sense and are very relatable if they are not always likable. And this DLC also gives us a glimpse into how Cloud's team will develop over time by showing us how they grow closer while overcoming their own trials and tribulations within the future games, proving that Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission is really smart. So with that being said, I hope you all understand my thoughts on the DLC, and if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, become a channel member, and support my Patreon if you enjoy my content. Also, if you want to see another video essay, that's on screen right now.